Some of the budget nasties and goodies are already out in the public. Some costs and taxes for petrol and higher income earners will rise. Family tax benefits will shrink and some on unemployment and disability benefits will face tougher restrictions. On the other side of the equation, the government is promising faster spending on road projects. Stephen Ciobo is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Treasurer and he joins me now. Stephen Ciobo, welcome to Capitol Hill.
Thanks, Lyndal.
Now, it's been revealed that the government will be axing or merging a number of government agencies. Do we know yet how many jobs will go?
Well, look, all the detail, I'm sure you've heard this from me and from others in the government, will be released tomorrow night, Lyndal. We've got about 31 hours to go until all the details are there. But the key point is this, Lyndal. We gave a commitment to the Australian people at the last election that we were going to do several things. We're going to get the budget back on track, restore economic growth, restore prosperity and make government more efficient after 6 years of Labor's reckless spending and the inefficiencies that we saw as a consequence of Labor.
Amongst those commitments was a commitment to lose 12,000 public sector jobs, but no more than that. Is it possible that more than that will end up going?
We will see a decline in the public service employment over the forward estimates, and that's a consequence of making government leaner and making government more efficient. But you know, Lyndal, when I talk to people out there in the Australian community, there was a lot of the private sector that had a lot of job shedding through the GFC as people's had to tighten their belts. Government almost stood immune to that. At a time when the private sector was doing the hard yards, it seemed that a lot of the bureaucracy was increasing. So we are unashamedly about making government more efficient. This is in the long-term interests of Australia, getting us on a more stable platform. And I think what ultimately people are looking for, Lyndal, is that when it comes to the services that government deliver, that there's not a dilution of our ability to provide those services. We're committed to that. We're committed to that, but we'll make sure that we do it in a more efficient way.
Does it worry you if bureaucrats lose their jobs? It doesn't often seem to worry politicians, particularly because Canberra is seen as safe Labor territory.
You know, Lyndal, I don't relish anybody losing their job. Nobody wants to lose their job, and it has a material impact for that particular family or that particular individual in terms of their ability to pay their rent or service their mortgage. So, of course, we don't welcome any of these things, and we don't do so lightly. But we also have an obligation to the Australian people, to the taxpayers that fund all of this. And those taxpayers are expecting us as a coalition to make the hard but necessary decisions that make sure Australia is on a sustainable footing. We were not on a sustainable footing. We were racking up huge levels of debt on a daily basis. We are going to put Australia back on a more sustainable footing.
Are you personally comfortable with fuel taxes going up, with the indexation being reintroduced, with a deficit levy on higher income earners, after there were promises made that taxes wouldn't rise?
The promises that we made going into the last election was to stop the boats. We so far have been successful at doing that. We also promised we were going to get rid of the mining and carbon taxes. We're trying to do that. Labor's stopping us. We said that we'd restore Australia's economic credibility and the budget back into a more sustainable footing, and we're in the process of doing that, and we'll see that tomorrow night.
And you also promised that taxes wouldn't rise, that personal income taxes wouldn't rise, that energy costs would go down.
Well, all of these things, Lyndal, are tied up with semantics around the words that you want to play. But I think the clear message the government delivered ahead of the last election was that if you elect us, we will stop the boats. We're doing that. If you elect us, we'll get Australia back on track when it comes to economic credibility. We're doing that. We said if you elect us, we'll stop Labor's reckless spending. We're doing that. So on those promises, Lyndal, I'll just answer your question. On those promises, we are committed to delivering on our promises. Now, when it comes to am I comfortable with speculation around increases in, for example, fuel excise, as a Liberal, as a member of the coalition, I never want to see taxes going up, ideally. But we also need to be realistic about the size of the economic challenge that has been left to us by Labor, who are spending money hand over fist.
You say there's semantics being played with words. This was a direct question put to Tony Abbott before the election. So how do you get the budget back into surplus without putting up taxes? His answer, by sensible expenditure restraint. That, in this case, appears not to have been enough, and some taxes will rise.
Lyndal, there's no doubt that we are in a much worse situation than we anticipated going into the election. There's no doubt that we never forecast that Labor would have been borrowing so much money, would have been spending in such a reckless way so much money, that Australia was on track to, within a decade, reaching $700 billion worth of debt. So
it will be a self-sales pitch, won't it, given that Mr Abbott put so much store in keeping his promises.
Look, make no mistake, Lyndal, this is not a budget that you would create if you wanted to be popular out there in the electorate and think it's going to win over a lot of votes. It's not the type of budget that we're doing because we're trying to appeal to as many people as possible. This is the kind of budget that is necessary by a mature adult government to start to restore Australia's credibility and to repair the damage that Labor left.
One final question. MPs' pay has been frozen. The Remuneration Tribunal will implement that, but it also says it will continue to monitor economic and wages growth as it remains committed to ensuring remuneration levels for the public officers are competitive and maintained at levels that support the significant and valuable contribution of office holders. Is there a prospect that the Remuneration Tribunal could effectively unwind that process next year, that give you some catch-up pay after the end?
Well, you're asking me to speculate on what an independent third party is going to do, and of course I can't speculate about that. But what I will say is this. The changes that are made in this budget, of course, impact on all Australians in the same way as they impact on public servants and they impact on politicians. When the belt is tightened, we all feel it. Over and above that, there's also been suggestions that there'll be the pay freeze for politicians and for senior public servants. That's an additional measure that we think is an appropriate symbol at this point in time to make sure that people understand that in addition to what the community feels, we're feeling all of that plus some.
Steve Ciobo, thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure.